America's Summary Mystery Prize is back. Grab one at any of our KFAN events or anytime you see the KFAN street team this summer out and about. Then redeem it at Mall of America for discounts and exciting prizes. Check out the upcoming event schedule, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
And now, it's time for Ode to a Dead Guy.
Man, this one came right out of left field, and I just heard about it via that iHeart Sports Update. A relief pitcher named Phil Regan has died at the age of, I think, did I hear 89 years old? And it's a name that many of even old school fans might not be familiar with here. I knew him because he eventually became the closer for the Chicago Cubs back in the late 60s. In fact, the infamous 69 season where the Cubs blew an 8.5 game lead with like 6 weeks to go in the season to the Mets, he was the closer that year. But I bring him up not necessarily because a lot of people here can relate to him, but because of his nickname. Phil Regan's nickname was the Vulture. And apparently Sandy Koufax, who of course was a teammate of his when he pitched for the Dodgers, gave him the nickname. And the concept was, the Koufax theory was basically he's the guy, Regan's the guy who comes in late inning relief and sometimes takes the win away from starting pitchers, or at least gets the save, only having to pitch one or maybe 2 innings. In 66, I think he actually finished with a record as a relief pitcher of 14-1 with the Dodgers. And as the story goes, there was one instance where Regan comes in to relieve Koufax, who had pitched 8 innings, only 8 brilliant innings, only for the Dodgers to take the lead and then give Regan the victory instead. In other words, the lead got lost, and it ended up going to the guy who finished the ball game. We've talked about this before on this show. Nicknames, they just aren't very good anymore. They're not very colorful anymore. This is an old subject going way back. In fact, I think I wrote about this a few times too back in the East and Wretch days, which is like another lifetime ago. I mean, how good is that nickname, the Vulture? So do we not have nicknames now like that because we're not creative enough? We're too hip with it and wow to want to participate in that kind of nonsense. It's not cool. I don't know what it is, but I mean, how good a nickname is that for a closer? The Vulture. Come in, maybe you get 2 outs or get 3. Or like I said, you might even give up the lead, but if your team gets the lead back, you end up getting the victory, even though you blew the save. Very, very good relief pitcher. Unfortunately, as I said, will be associated with the collapsible Cubs. I think the Cubs that year, my recollection is over in like a 7-week period, they went from being 8.5 games up to losing the division by like 9 or 9.5. I mean, I think it was like a 17-game swing. That's hard to do. And a lot of that was the Mets literally didn't lose. Well, I shouldn't say literally. They rarely lost. And the Cubs kind of collapsed down the stretch in that game for sure. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is open at 64686. Somebody is texting, this is 612 guy. I would argue that Street Clothes is a pretty good nickname. Yes, it is a little more vicious. Most of the nicknames in the old days were meant as to be complimentary, I think, to the player. Street Clothes, which I think it was Charles Barkley who invented that particular nickname for Anthony Davis. A little more pejorative, I guess one could say. I'm not saying we don't have any, but what's weird is if you grow up with associating players with certain nicknames, you never forget them. It's just embedded in you. So when I hear the name Phil Regan, that's the first thing I think of, the Vulture. I love the name. I absolutely appreciate it. And it's even more vivid when I learned, and I did not know this, that apparently, at least according to AI, which is always right at this point, as we know, it was Sandy Koufax who first nicknamed Regan that. 89 years old. Let me see if I can give you any more. Pitched for 4 different teams, 13-year career from 60 to 72. Then he became a coach at Grand Valley State. Spent the next 47 years either coaching or scouting at various levels. Also pitched for the Tigers, as I mentioned, the Cubs, the White Sox, and the Dodgers. Let me see. I need to find the Phil Regan stats here to check one other thing. On the Minnesota sports scene, who currently has, I don't even know how many nicknames we got, but who would have the best among sports athletes? Who has the best nickname? What is the best nickname in Minnesota right now?
In Minnesota?
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to shock you. For my money, it's Corilla Thrill. Well, I feel like that's a solid one.
That's solid. Yeah, I don't think it's great, but it's solid.
I think it's good.
But what it tells you is I don't think we just don't even have that many.
I mean, is Ant-Man?
Yeah,
is that technically?
Yeah, it is. Technically, I guess it is. I don't love it myself. But it is, I think it would probably be one of them. And then if we broaden it out, forget current. What's the greatest nickname involving any Minnesota sports athlete ever? Or it could be coach. It doesn't necessarily have to be a player. I'm looking at the 69 Cubs. Regan had to be honest, he started strong that year, and I think he, like the rest of the team, he kind of collapsed. So his earned run average ended up being, they got him. I forgot that they acquired him from the Dodgers early. And then he had looked like a 2.20 earned run average, which is very good, but I think he had some of the nicknames too. It's hard to not, some of the old timers are bringing up the name Gary Gaetti, a former outstanding slick fielding, clutch hitting third baseman on the 87 Twins. Gary Gaetti. You know his nickname? You probably don't. You have no reason to know it. The Rat. But meant in an affectionate way.
Doesn't seem like it.
No, it's
So I did a quick search of
the Rat.
Great Minnesota nicknames in sports. Mm-hmm. Here's some of the ones that came up. Right. Tony O.
Yeah, Tony O, solid. Tony Oliva.
The Sheriff. Joe Nathan.
Denny Green.
That's
Joe Nathan was the sheriff?
That's what it says.
I don't even remember that one. The only sheriff I remember was Denny Green when he came to town, but go ahead.
Apparently, The Undertaker was John Randall, according to this search.
I don't remember that.
I don't remember that. But then
Harry the Hitman.
Harry the Hitman, but then there's AD all day.
Yeah. Right.
Let's see. The Cowboy, Jared Allen. How about Flower?
Flower's a good one.
Flower's a good one.
It's not just ours, but I think Flower's actually one of the better ones. I think we're a little bit nickname deprived here, to be honest with you.
Big Ticket?
I think we need Big Ticket's solid.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. That was I think Harlan came up with that one, if I'm not mistaken. For sure. Can we afford to go to 27, or is that going to screw us up? Because we can't probably. I'm a little behind here. I should have broken earlier. Let's go ahead and get break. Let's try to stay somewhat on schedule. If I take one now, I take one. Can I take the next one at 42, leading to Alec Lewis, or do I have to take another one? Yeah.
Yep, you can do that.
Let's do it that way. We'll pause here. We'll get some other nicknames. Anybody has any Phil Regan ideas, let me know. And I will talk about, I always assumed that the hockey community was the most sensitive, culturally speaking, in North America. I think I'm going to have to amend that particular belief based on my experience with a different community via X the last 24 hours. Stay tuned.
Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barreiro on the Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center. This report is sponsored by Whole Foods Market.
You already listened. Well, now you can watch The Fan. You can check out the KFAN YouTube channel for exclusive videos, in-depth takes, initials and password games, behind-the-scenes content, and much more. Search KFAN on YouTube and hit subscribe today.
Underrated one, I think, was established by my former colleague, Patrick Royce, Eddie Guardado. Didn't he name him Everyday Eddie? That's a great nickname for a relief pitcher, is it not? Everyday Eddie. I think that was his. I want to get to the, I wouldn't call it an online controversy, so to speak. But yeah, how about, is Wall of St. Paul established enough yet? It's unusual.
I like it.
And it's got a nice rhyme to it, right?
952 guy asked, does 9 count? Are we talking about 9?
Not yet. Jets, yeah, he's a huge name. I never thought the nickname was particularly, dramatic. And you know, what's funny, if you go back into history, some of the nicknames, they were rather disparaging about how, you know, somebody might look. They would do that. A lot of them weren't obvious, or there was a backstory that had something to do with it too. So I just was minding my own business, and I had a lot of extra time because we were trying to figure out, you know, we're waiting for flights and we're waiting to figure out what we're going to do. And see if I can find where this all began exactly. Hold on. I have to find it here. So I follow a Twitter handle called the Extreme Music Enthusiast. And they send these out every once in a while trying to get reaction. They're trying to just get people to participate. And the question they ask is, what is the most overrated band of all time? And I suggested the band that I've often suggested whenever this has been asked, much to the chagrin back in the day of the now late, great Bill Walton. I just wrote in Grateful Dead. Whew. Wow. I have to apologize to Fallness and the hockey community for suggesting that he, as a member of the hockey community, most insensitive group out there, most defensive group out there. I don't even think they can hold a candle to the Grateful Dead community. They are, well, I will add, a lot of people agreed, but let me give you some examples of some stuff that came in via X's response. Tell me you're not a music guy without telling me you're not a music guy. When people went to see the Grateful Dead for the first time, there were usually only two possible responses. One, this is the slowest, most boring, most unrehearsed band in the world. Two, I'm quitting my job or leaving school and going to see every show on the tour. It's actually very well articulated, those two extremes. He's not taking a position, but he's laying out, I think, reality. We're like licorice. Most people don't like it, but the people who like it, well, they really like it. That's a quote from Jackass Truther, quoting Jerry Garcia from the band. And then there's a photo of Jerry Garcia flipping me the bird. I never thought of them as being rated in any way, really. The Dead are kind of a standalone entity, very unique in its path. I think you either love them or dislike, have no feeling for them. I happen to like them, but that's just my own subjective opinion. Bill Walton is rolling in his grave right now. Dan. KFAN guys are the worst. Get off my For You page. What other band has over 1,500 bands covering them and getting gigs left and right? You're on the bus or you're off the bus. The first step to really loving the Dead is learning that they do indeed often suck. And their fans are nerds, and the band members were nerds, and they really play crappy music to stadiums full of people in their later years because they couldn't stop when they should have. What does a deadhead say when he runs out of pot? He says, "What the hell is this crap we are listening to?" Oh, by the way, many people had other suggestions on who the most overrated should be. Comical, writes Jason Burns. There are tons of reasons why this is false. This is the most obvious being that they are not widely regarded as being a great band anyway, so that in itself makes you wrong. I'd wager if you went to a show with Bill, your opinion would soften. Absolutely agree. Total cult following. Otherwise, their music is mostly unbearable to listen to. This was my favorite, but I'm proud of myself for not responding until now. I'm guessing you don't understand jazz or symphony either. Your definition of music must be a bit more simple, which is fine, actually. Now, I kind of want to say, when it comes to Grateful Dead fans, I rest my case about their level of defensiveness, and I might add, arrogance. It, once upon a time, was my biggest problem with the soccer community, was, well, you're just too stupid. It's just the game's too nuanced for you. What I wanted to say to Tweeter Paul is, I understand jazz so much that probably my favorite jazz performer, well, it's a tie. And truthfully, one of the two was more of a musical genius than the other, but they played together, Miles Davis and John Coltrane. So yeah, I have an appreciation of improvisation if it leads somewhere. When I listened to the jazz greats, when I listened to the Allman Brothers, for God's sake, back in the day, they went on for days in concert. One song, 38 minutes, 52 minutes. But it had a point, believe it or not. You could pick up the thread on it. There's no thread in Grateful Dead. Sorry. It's the old deal of, well, there's the famous line I'll have to clean up, where Miles Davis, as I said, he had Coltrane in several incantations of his own band, and then eventually Coltrane went off on his own. And one of the complaints Miles had about Coltrane was that sometimes he felt like he went on too long in some of his solos. And the Coltrane response would be, sometimes I just have a hard time stopping. To which Miles Davis said, take the horn out of your bleeping mouth. That'll stop it. Simple as that. That's what I want to say to Grateful Dead. Just because you can go on forever doesn't mean you're obligated to go on forever. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in improvisation.
It's already started on the text line. Here's Cecil from Maple Grove. The Grateful Dead were the most influential and innovative band in the history of music.
Yeah.
Here's another one, 612 guy. Allegedly, unless you've seen Grateful Dead live, which I haven't, you really cannot offer up an opinion on them. Just for the record, Dan.
Yeah, well,
so you have to see them live, or else you have no opinion.
Yeah. Let me get to a couple more that came in. No doubt you like Dave Matthews. The insinuation is this music's too deep and too nuanced. You're too mainstream. I happen to not apologize for a lot of mainstream music I like. I got over that phase. You know what happens in your 20s, at least back in the day, is you end up rejecting bands that you like because to be considered cool, you felt obligated to. Oh, that's too accessible. That's too easy. And at some point you mature past that and you grow up and you say, if I like it, I like it. I'm not going to apologize for it. Is some stuff a little more simple than other things? Yeah. But too many people end up rejecting good mainstream music for all the wrong reasons, just because they want to be in the in-group that says, oh, not edgy enough. Oh, they're not complicated enough. Get over yourself. Good music's good music, I would say. But there's plenty of music. If you grew up in a house that plays nothing but jazz and Ray Charles almost all the time, come on, man. This is just, Dave Matthews. That's the extent of what I might be capable of paying attention to. There's another good one here. Don't forget, by the way, we're not going to necessarily talk football so much as an interesting poll that Alec Lewis has put together from Vikings fans as we prepare for training camp, which is not that far away now for sure. Turning off KFAN every day at 3 p.m. religiously now. So that the overrated shot was enough. That was
the line.
That was it. Everybody's got a line.
You take a shot at Grateful Dead. See you later.
Josh texts or tweets, "You're getting the hang of this engagement thing." Too smart. He sees right through me. Get up and get dumb bleeping answer, he says. Walton, another Walton rolling over in his grave, which is true. It's undeniable. Tell me you don't know music without telling me. I think that's another one of those. Amen to that. Someone doesn't like great music. Your loss. Who is this jackass? Actually, he used the a-hole word instead. I am the a-hole in the afternoon. Insipid and insufferable. Does he mean me or does he mean Grateful Dead? Or maybe both. Go to bed, old man. 1,000,000% agree. Worst take I've ever seen in this app. Excellent take. Agreed. I agree. You probably worship Bruce Springsteen, huh? Actually, I don't. I respect his music. Springsteen's a weird one for me in that I've never... How do I put it? I don't think I've ever felt the mystical connection to his music. And part of it for me is I actually don't think... If you forced me to name my favorite Springsteen album, it would probably be Wild... what is it called? The Innocent and the E Street Shuffle. I think that would be it. That goes way, way back now, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you see this text?
No.
612 guy says, Dan, no joke here. If you listen to the Without a Net album start to finish and don't change your opinion, I will donate $500 to a charity of your choice.
Wow.
That's how serious this conversation is.
That's
controversial
serious.
It is.
Yeah.
Also, Meat Sauce texted me the Dead Whales.
The thing that's interesting about it is the old man thing doesn't work in this case because it's mainly old men that like the Dead. Men older than me. And that's pretty old. Or maybe it's another generation. Let's see. He is, of course, you want to talk about the non sequitur, which we get politically? So my tweet again was most overrated band, I say Grateful Dead. To which somebody named Leslie tweets, he's, of course, a big fan of Aaron Rupar. What the hell does that have to do with anything? You got to be a bot. You're insane. 100% yes. I will fight you. Okay, nerd. There are plenty of fans already. Thanks for listening. Clickbait. So there you have it. Yeah, it's quite. There are a bunch of them that are coming in. I was a Grateful Dead fan until I heard their music. As a member of the hockey community, I accept your apology, Dan. Yeah, I mean, these folks are, and this is not my first sojourn in this area. We don't have Oak on as much as we used to. I know Common has them on, I think, pretty much every week. And we used to talk a lot about Grateful Dead. What now? Oh, are you kidding me? Yeah, he actually called in.
I swear.
Oh, that's too funny. I honestly didn't see that. I was just thinking about you, and then I get a point from Blakemore, and I look at the screen and say, there's Brian Oak. Can't make it up.
The bat signal went out, and just to clarify on that, I'm on with Common every week, every Wednesday. In fact, I was sitting in that very room that you're sitting in with the echoey headphones just a couple short hours ago.
So, refresh, my memory, I sometimes remember what I want to remember. So, my recollection over the years when you and I have talked Grateful Dead is that you are not that into them either, and that we've kind of both gotten ripped for mocking them, but maybe that was somebody else. I don't know. What's the official Oak position on Grateful Dead?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I've tempered my attitude over the years regarding the Dead, because you cannot disrespect what they created. They're an important American band. They're an important American music story. And they're the dedication and devotion and near cult-like dedication.
Oh, it is cult-like.
Over the years across, even when people sobered up and stayed with them, you go to a Grateful Dead show, there are people with real money there and very professional in real lives. It's not just a cavalcade of merry pranksters, I was never a huge fan of the Grateful Dead. And when I was a young burgeoning hippie, I liked the long hair, I liked the lifestyle, I liked some of the recreational substances. I'm going to be honest, I had kind of a soft spot in my heart for hippie chicks. And so I liked all the trappings of the Grateful Dead. And then I came to live with 4 Deadheads. And as a result, they would be gone for months out of the year, because they would do what you do. You follow the Grateful Dead on tour.
Right.
The unfortunate part of them being so deep, and that'd be nice, I get the place to myself as opposed to living with 4 other hippies. And so it was, I don't have anything against the Dead per se. I'm going to go out there, and I'm trying to temper this, but I'm still going to get hate mail. They're boring. They're just not very good. The songs at their best, they've got a couple of decent songs. American Beauty, Working Man's Dead. These are albums that the sort of average everyday person can get into. But where I take umbrage is, it's one thing to go to a live show, but another to listen to a live recording. And pre-internet, there was for many, many years, a vast network of people who would exchange tapes, because, if you're all into this thing, well, oh man, I just got a cassette tape of the Fillmore East 71 with Hamza El-Dean's on drum going into space, and then they come out into Sugar Magnolia and Scarlet Fire, and they had their own, language, their own vernacular. My issue on these tapes is they were often not board tapes. They were just crummy crowd tapes, because the Dead would not only allow it, but encourage it. Mm-hmm. And so even then, if you got a decent tape, what happened is people would share and swap these tapes incessantly, and they would then dub that tape, and then that would get dubbed by a friend, and that would get dubbed. So you've got these 8th, 9th, 10th generation cassettes of already a dodgy recording to begin with, and so it just sounded garbled and you couldn't hear anything, and even the bass song to begin with, not that great. And I understand the spirit. I understand the unity, the celebration, the whole bit. But to me, they were dull, and I hated the tape bit. And I went to see them live a couple times, and I've seen a lot of shows, and I've taken a lot of the mind-altering substances you're supposed to. When they say you're on the bus or you're off the bus, the old Ken Kesey, Merry Pranksters reference. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid I'm off the bus, but no disrespect to those who love them, because I know people. I have dear friends that have a fire in their heart and their eyes when it comes to the Grateful Dead. Yeah. Well,
I mean, again, I do not have a problem with songs that go on forever. I really don't. But I do think just because you can make a song go on forever doesn't obligate you to go on forever. That I even think, for me, some of the best improvisational stuff, I feel like still has a point, or it still has a thread, or there's still a discipline to it that I love in some of the bands that I would choose, or even jazz compositions that I would be more interested in. In some cases, I think with this band, it's almost like, we're just going to go on forever. And, it'll be cool because no one else does it, or no one releases as much stuff as we were. Not everything you do should be released.
Well, that I couldn't agree with more, nor should everything be recorded and shared in perpetuity. This is the jam band, right? The whole thing was improvisation. But when we talk about the jazz greats or the prog rock greats, I hate to say, I break it to people, and although it was a nice moment in space and time, and although they definitely represented a thing that was happening, they weren't great musicians or songwriters. And so then we take that song, and with guys who can play but aren't brilliant players, that just start going do dee 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 doo dee doo dee 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 dee, and just they're not jazz greats, right? They're not following the lead and then taking it off in these fascinating directions. It's sort of a noisy, meandering mess, and certain people have found a way to fall in love with what they do and listen for these intricacies. I've tried, trust me. I had a front row seat to Deep Dead experience for many years. I didn't feel it, I feel like you don't get to pick what you love, but I never felt that thing. And so, and I bought the ticket. I got on the ride, and I went to a couple shows in full bloom. And in that, you should be able to listen to recorded animal noises and be lost in the wonder of it all. And I was still bored. I'm not a fan, but I have no disrespect because they created a thing unlike anything else that ever existed anywhere in the realms of American music in terms of this touring circus that literally was its own minor economy, this nomadic economy that moved around the country and really around the world. But there were people that, when you talked about how that guy who commented on your thread, or your thing on X, that either you were bored and you left, or you quit your job, dropped out of school, sold everything you owned, and followed that band on tour. There were people who that was their livelihood. They followed the Dead around selling pot persimmon bread out of the side of their VW bus, and that's not an exaggeration or hyperbole or a stereotype. I've seen the people. I went to plenty of shows to try to, because I wanted to crack the code, man.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe it's too good for me. Maybe it's too deep for me, but I put real effort into cracking the code, and I never got there.
I wish we had more time. We don't usually have a guest this late in the 5, or in the 4, I should say, but we do. We got Alec Lewis here in a minute after a break. I will read you this. There's a million texts coming in.
This is a passionate fan base, to say the very least.
So, but here, I'll give you this one. So glad you have Oak on. Love when he's on with Common, and a nice bonus to hear him on with you. Yeah, we don't do it enough, but, on the other hand, I do know so it's every Wednesday. Every single Wednesday, you guys
every Wednesday in 2 segments, 1:15 and then again at 1:35 or whatever it is, straddling the breaks there. But yeah, for 45 minutes we talk about any of the great rockers we might have lost, and we also just talk about the news of the day. I'm
going to find a subject for you to chew on so that we can have you on again with a little bit more time, without getting in the way of that big bit. Good to hear your voice as always. Thanks for checking in, man. We'll talk soon.
That sounds great. Thanks, Dan.
Brian Oak, the one and the only, and let me see if I can put him on hold. There we go. We got it. We are running a little bit late. We've got Alec Lewis coming up. An interesting poll that attempts to get in the brains of Minnesota Vikings fans. What are their expectations? What are their perceptions about this organization, about the head coach, about many other things, the quarterback situation? All that covered with Alec Lewis. That's next.
You're listening to Barreiro on The Fan.
Hey, it's Meat Sauce here from my friends at Connecticut, and it's time for Matter of Fact with Meat Sauce. Fact, stress.
Stay connected and plugged into everything KFAN, sports updates, ticket giveaways, show highlights, and more. You follow KFAN 1003 on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, and YouTube. Stay connected to the sports leader, The Fan.
To our next guest. We're a little bit late. We got a very nice impromptu call from Brian Oak, and he did not disappoint. He also got, I'm off the hook now about ripping the Grateful Dead, because now he's on the hook for ripping the Dead as well. I don't know if our next guest has ever even heard of the Grateful Dead. He's awfully young. Alec Lewis covers the Vikings in the National Football League for The Athletic. Would you classify yourself as a Deadhead?
I wouldn't say so, and also you don't have to apologize for being a little late because there's nothing going on in Vikings land, don't feel bad at all. I would say I've listened to Dead and Company a solid amount because I like John Mayer, which may get people to rip me, but
right.
yeah. So that's the extent that I go.
Yeah. Well, I've got some good texts continuing to come in. I will save those for later. I had missed this piece because I'd been out of town for a couple of days, but Garzi had brought this to my attention. The poll that you do that attempts to sort of get some kind of a handle on perceptions regarding the team as we now the countdown is on pretty much for training camp from the fans as it pertains to the organization, the head coach, the quarterback, the general manager hire, etc. If you had to summarize, would you say there's an overarching theme you came away with from these particular fan results or poll results?
Yeah, so we do this every year. I think I started it in 2023, the summer after I moved up here, and it was something I did with the Kansas City Royals before I started covering this team. And it's just like, you know, you see things on Twitter all the time and on social media, and in passing with talking to people who are fans of the team out and about, but rarely do I get a clear snapshot that is, you try to get as objective of a snapshot as possible of how fans actually view the current team and where things stand. And so I love doing it every year and love comparing the results from past years. And I'd say this year's overarching takeaway was there's no question that from 2023 to 2025, there was an upward trend, I would say, of confidence in the leadership and in the overall direction. And this would probably be the first year since we began doing it at The Athletic where there was a clear drop in confidence, and I would say by addendum, a clear want from the fan base to see proof in a lot of the, I would say, narratives and perceptions that have been created and generated over the last few seasons. So that was interesting to me.
It does. What strikes me that this is inevitable, that whether it's a fair conclusion, if you don't have, at the very least, playoff victories to fall back on, let alone maybe some sort of a push close to the Super Bowl, right? A run of some sort. It's going to be the elephant in the room. Whether the coach is viewed as a good coach, capable, whatever the case may be, sooner or later you got to have a reservoir that goes beyond goodwill. It has to be postseason success of some sort, right? So I'm not surprised, and I can't blame people for saying, all right, I like so many things, and I keep being told they got this, they got that, they're good at this, they do well in the polls in terms of how players view the organization, but I got to have some payoff, right? At some point, that is the elephant in the room that shouldn't surprise anybody.
I mean, it's exactly right. Like, I think the last line of the piece, and I had it there purposefully, was a quote from someone that I thought was representative, where it's just like, at some point, talk is cheap and results have to be shown. And I mean, this break period gives a lot of time to think and study and learn and reflect and all of that. But I had a conversation with a close friend of mine who's from here and a longtime, fan of all of the teams in this area. And they posed an interesting question to me of, like, if you presented the four big team, Twins, Wild, Wolves, and Vikings head coach kind of, if you presented an optics of how they're viewed and perceived to, like, the national media or the national just fans of those specific sports, who would rank the highest? Their suggestion to me was like,
Alec?
John Hines or Chris Finch. Yeah. Those two have won many, specifically Chris Finch has won many more playoff series. I thought that was just an interesting way to kind of look at and think about the perception.
Now we're going to put Alec on.
There's a lot of.
Well, let's try to get a better connection with Alec. We had him, and then we're losing him. We lost him, and then we had him. And I don't want to miss his major point. 64686. If you have any questions about the poll, you could play along if you have a subscription to The Athletic. I think I have 3. Because I can't get rid of the other 2, so I think I'm paying 3 times over. about what, again, I don't think there's anything scientific about this poll, but it does give a little bit of maybe of a feeling of where fans are. And the question that a lot of people have is whether, there should ever be any sort of hot seat conversation for the head coach. And no, I don't think so. I think that's a little bit knee-jerk and a little bit kind of oversimplifying the story. On the other hand, I think you got to have a payoff at some point. The complication has been the difficulty at the quarterback position, where you say, well, could any coach deal with that any better? I would still maintain that I didn't think the head coach did a particularly good job navigating some of the J.J. McCarthy difficulties. You can't force him to throw well, but I think early there were some ways, I think there were some suppositions made about the ability to ease J.J. in that we've learned were just inaccurate. And maybe I think the way Seifert has put it in the past is that they misread his floor, as in McCarthy's floor, not so much his ceiling. All right, we got you back. I don't know where you were, but we lost you. You were making a major point, and then you were on, and then you were gone. You were on, you were gone. So pick up wherever you think you were.
Yeah, I feel like I'm mimicking Lavelle here, so I apologize. 394, yeah. It's pretty tough. But no, yeah. I just think, it was an interesting conversation to have had with someone who is just a buddy of mine, and to talk about just some of the perception nationally of the coaches in the Twin Cities that I think we're all very familiar with. And so, I think it's very understandable that for as much as it came clear through the poll that the 3,000 plus people who responded do like so much about what Kevin O'Connell has brought to the Minnesota Vikings organization. If there's not the production at the end, then it's going to be harder and harder to cling to the reputation that's obviously been built.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's inevitable. And look, I mean, some of what the best organizations do is they don't overreact, or they don't make a change for the sake of making a change. They say, we trust what we think we see every day, that this is going to pay off. Now, the complicating factor that you could say is less about the coach, more about the quarterback, is the quarterback situation, right? Because there hasn't been, it's almost to a degree that this head coach has had to deal with what several head coaches behind him have, that there's not a guy that you say, okay, here's the guy for 10 years, right? And that does make this job more challenging. Now, I would submit to you, I'm not sure that I think that McCarthy was handled the best way. I think they made an arrogant assumption that they could ease him in from the beginning, and they didn't understand how low his floor could be. Some of that has to be coaching, I think. But and I know, I mean, I remember having conversations with Jerry Burns, the former head coach of the Vikings. And we were at times during the time he was, running the team, pretty critical, because the team was perceived as a team that had a lot of talent, big egos, but it didn't necessarily pay off. And after he finished, and after, occasionally we would have him in studio here, he'd say, off the air, he'd say, you ever think that some of that might have had to do with who we were playing at quarterback, or we were using at the quarterback position, and we're playing, Joe Montana and Steve Young? And it was a fair point, because as good as Wade Wilson was, kind of coming out of nowhere as a backup, the year that they kind of emerged, late in 87 and then 88, he was not a great quarterback. He certainly was not a Joe Montana. And so a lot of times our perception of coaches end up really being directly related to what they had to deal with, what they had at their disposal at the most important position on the field.
No, it's exactly right. I was having a conversation with an executive a couple weeks ago. We're just talking about a bunch of league things, and they were making the same point about front office. I think the line that they used was like, if you replace the quarterback situation in one of the organizations like Cleveland or one of those spots, like, what is the perception then of what that front office is or can be? And I thought that was a very astute point. I'd say complicating factor with this specific situation with Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings, and this, Dan, is the level of input that this specific
Hello?
went really well in 2024 to moving off of Sam Darnold because you wanted to turn, the page in 2025. And then a specific move and why I think this season is going to be beyond revelatory, both, for this organization and Kevin O'Connell specifically, is because of the direction he obviously had without a full-time GM in choosing to bring in Kyler Murray. And so, it makes it, I would say, murky to overall and just broadly evaluate Kevin O'Connell. But there's no question that he has had a heavy hand in the quarterbacks who have been brought here. And so it's undeniable to think that would be a part of the overall record, regardless of whether he had final 53-man say in the end or not.
How do the Rubes feel about our general manager's hire? I ask, almost not wanting to get the answer, because how much do we really know? I mean, we're basing this generally on, reputation a little bit and the organization that you come from, right? And so I don't even know. I mean, it's a name probably a lot of Rubes had never even heard of until the Vikings hired him.
I think people were very positive and reacted very well to, more than anything, hiring someone from an organization like Seattle that has produced Super Bowls without bottoming out, which is the ownership, I'd say, guideline here in Minnesota. So there's optimism there. But you hear it all the time, fan perspectives on executives or GMs, and it's really hard to discern what these people do individually on a day-to-day basis when they're not in that GM role. And then furthermore, when you plug someone who wasn't a general manager and leading an organization into that very role, it's an impossible evaluation or projection in terms of how that's going to go. So while there's optimism, I think it's going to be very fascinating to look back on this a year from now once Nolan Teasley has gone through a season, once he's gone through additions in training camp, once he's gone through another draft, and that will be the first, I think, real tall tale sign of what he's capable of, even though people within the industry have definitely given high marks, I would say, to ownership making the hire that they eventually did make.
All right, let me offer you up I think, a fairly juicy hypothetical here. Let's just say for the argument that I'm about to make that Kyler Murray is the starter and has a season very similar to the season that Sam Darnold did. The Vikings they make the playoffs. They finish with a strong record. And then let's say they get in the playoffs and they kind of do what they did with Darnold. Mm-hmm. Are the Vikings this time obligated to keep Kyler Murray because of what happened the last time and all the, I guess you could say, the rather large domino effect to letting him go? I mean, that to me is the most intriguing question: is what's going to determine whether they go, all right, this time we will go 3 years, $100 million or whatever. Is that going to be easier because Kyler has been a starter? Is it going to be a necessity because of what happened when they didn't the last time? What's going to go into that decision beyond this season?
Yeah, I mean, the calculus will be different in the sense that the Vikings wouldn't have behind Kyler Murray a young quarterback who had yet to show himself at all in front of both the staff, fan base, teammates, et cetera. I mean, that was one of the components of the Sam Darnold revisionist history that is interesting to me. It's a question that I have kind of asked aloud. I've asked people internally. It's hard to get a direct answer. But, was there actually a path to keeping Sam Darnold and then maintaining J.J. McCarthy's I'd say, commitment to the organization. Like, that is a question that I have that I don't have a definitive answer to, and I think it's an important one, whereas this time around, if in this hypothetical world, Kyler Murray did perform and produce, you don't have someone waiting in the wings that everybody's yearning to see. Now, I will also kind of dovetail the answer and say that and this is me with an analyst hat on, like, it doesn't seem like smart operation to make decisions because of the result of the last decision you make. I mean, I just think all people are different, all circumstances are different, and just because you swung and missed, potentially, if this is the world that it goes down, if you swung and missed on drafting a quarterback, the idea that you would refrain from ever doing that again because of how it panned out the last time, or moving on from a quarterback because of how it panned out, like, I just don't think that's a smart way to operate. And I also don't think that having a new general manager, Nolan Teasley, will preclude them from acting in a way that they feel is best, regardless of what it ends up looking like. So, I mean, I've told people with this conversation, because I get asked all the time, like, I think it's way far down the road. I think to expect Kyler Murray to have a similar year is banking on durability and production at a level that, I mean, Sam Darnold has just proven to be a really productive quarterback at a level that, I mean, for Kyler Murray to go out and do that would be highly impressive, and I think lofty at this point for me to expect.
Who do the Rubes prefer at quarterback?
Yeah, I'd say for 2026, it was like 70% of the 3,000 folks who responded said they wanted Kyler Murray to be the starter in 2026, but that there were like 50% of folks who want J.J. McCarthy to be the long-term starter of the organization. Those things obviously are kind of at odds with one another, but in some form or fashion. But yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the majority would like productive quarterback play. And in many ways, I think that will then alleviate any concern or questions that Justin Jefferson, who handled things very well in 2025, would have a harder time doing that in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, that certainly makes some sense for me as well. You know, one last thing on Teasley, and I don't know if we've talked about this or I've talked about it with other folks that we have on regularly as well on the Vikings, but what I'm struck by already, given the number of additions and subtractions, is I don't want to go as far as to say there's a new sheriff in town, because it's fairly clear here it's an unusual arrangement. It sounds like the head coach, reports to the owner, the general manager, the owner. But to me, what this says already is this organization is being changed. And there is a new voice that is going to have impact here on some of these significant decisions that was not here before, and clearly, to me, a much bigger way, perhaps, than Kwesi represented. Do you agree with that?
Yes, there is no question. I mean, when Kwesi Adofo-Mensah took over, there was a very clear understanding for him and for those around him that there was just not going to be a lot of turnover with the iteration of the front office that had been set up under Rick Spielman before that. This time around, with Nolan Teasley, he arrived with a clear understanding that he was going to be able to start to shape this thing from the outset at an interesting time, at a level that just Kwesi Adofo-Mensah wasn't able to. And that is a signal that is important. I'm glad that you mentioned it. It's one that's going to be interesting to follow a year from now to see how he, after assessing the staff, wants to further kind of morph and shape and configure those around him. But that is one of the reasons, I think, that people around the league have viewed what the Vikings have done. I'd say, wouldn't say they're scared, but they're definitely respect the willingness of ownership to allow Nolan Teasley to build things in some way the way he wants to start to kind of push the process towards a place that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah just never had the cachet internally to be able to push towards. So I do think it's a relevant, factor as we continue and begin really to analyze what he's able to do in the front office.
So this survey and also the results that you lay out, is this a freebie, or do you have to have a subscription to The Athletic?
I think, if you're a newcomer, I think there's some freebie-ish type of opportunities that we've got. I'd say, this is where you got to ask the John Krasinskis and the Michael Russos of the world, what the business setup is. They're much more in tune to these high-level conversations. It just kind of filters to me, I would say.
That's fair. Well, you know your place. That's good. It's a pecking order. It's inevitable you're going to get there. It's just you might have to wait a minute or two. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, there's no wait. I mean, you got to go out and take it. There's a commitment every single day.
You're right.
And fan surveys are the direct path to getting there. There's no question about it.
We appreciate the time. Do we have a training camp date yet? Is it set?
Not an official one. I believe the rookies report July 26th and the veterans July 28th. So, I mean, we are 3 weeks out. I'm expecting press conference around that time. And then, I mean, it is all gas, no brakes.
Outstanding. Good to catch up, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks,
Alec. Appreciate you guys.
Alec Lewis covers the Vikings in the NFL for The Athletic. Interesting piece that is up most recently there. Kessler will join at the bottom of the hour. I've got some very compelling texts to come that are coming in, including a nickname nomination that I should have remembered. I mean, this was my guy, and I didn't name it, but we'll get to that nickname and some other stuff when we return.
You're listening to Barreiro on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.